The First World War was over, and Russia was still trying to recover from its effects. In Petrograd, the situation was sternly serious. Strangely, the river Neva literally seemed to highlight the social and economic divide in the city. To the left of the Neva were the well-to-do areas such as the Winter Palace, official buildings, and the place where the Duma met. To the right of the Neva were the workers' quarters and factories. In February of 1917, workers from around 50 factories on the right bank of Neva called a strike. In many places, the women led the strike. Did you know that in order to commemorate this event, 22nd February is today celebrated the world over as International Women's Day? Workers moved to the left side of the riverbank, and by the end of the day, the fashionable quarters and official buildings were surrounded by workers. The government responded by calling in troops to control the situation. It then suspended the Duma. This was the last straw. The protests became louder and more violent. The soldiers refused to fire at the protesters. Instead, they joined them. The striking workers and the soldiers got together and formed the Petrograd Soviet. The Tsar was finally forced to abdicate. Russia was finally free from the monarchy, and a provincial government was formed. Lenin saw this as the apt time to return to Russia from his exile. He propagated the 3 key points from his April theses: bringing the war to an end, transferring land to the peasants, and the nationalization of banks. In addition, he wanted the Bolshevik Party to rename itself as the Communist Party. The provincial government, headed by Kerensky, saw Lenin as a threat and started arresting the Bolsheviks and resisting the spread of their ideas. Lenin feared that Kerensky was setting up a dictatorship, and he convinced the Bolsheviks to stage an uprising. He appointed a military revolutionary committee under Leon Trotsky to organize the uprising. In October 1917, the Bolsheviks, with the help of Leon Trotsky, successfully seized power from the provincial government. So the year 1917 was very eventful for Russia, as it saw the fall of the monarchy, the rise and fall of the Kerensky government, and finally the rise of Lenin and the Bolsheviks. Lenin and the Bolsheviks seized control of Russia after the October Revolution of 1917. The Bolsheviks immediately started work on the agenda prescribed by Lenin's April theses. They first nationalized all the banks and brought them under government management. They then declared land as social property and returned it to the peasants. And they ended the war and brought in changes to the army uniforms so as to assert the change. One of the changes was the new Soviet hat called the Budyonovka. To match their new ideals, the Bolshevik Party renamed itself as the Russian Communist Party. The next step was to conduct the elections, where they failed to gain a majority. Lenin disregarded the results, dismissed the assembly, and subsequently began to rule Russia. The Russian Communist Party ruled with an iron hand. They created the secret police called the Cheka to control possible anti-Bolsheviks. All these decisions led to resistance among the people, and paved way for the civil war in Russia. The Bolsheviks, referred to as the Reds, had two primary opponents. One was the socialist revolutionists, called the Greens. The other was the pro-Tsarists, called the Whites. Supporting the Whites and the Greens were France, America, Britain, and Japan, as they were worried seeing the growth of socialism in Russia. The civil war between the Bolsheviks and the anti-Bolsheviks had a lot of casualties on both sides. Looting and banditry, coupled with famine, became a common occurrence. Finally, by January 1920, with the help of non-Russian nationalities and Muslim jihadists, the Bolsheviks finally managed to win the war. In return, on December 1922, when the Soviet Union was created, the non-Russian nationals were given political autonomy. And thus, the Bolsheviks managed to retain control of the Soviet Union through the Civil War. However, they were not able to win over the different nationalities because of unpopular policies such as the discouragement of nomadism. While the Civil War was going on, the Bolsheviks kept both banks and industries nationalized. They made 5-year plans centered on economic growth. This included the fixing of prices to promote industrial growth. For the next few years, under Lenin, the Soviet Union saw both industrial and economic growth.